Okay. So let's start with our rocks. Oop, I forgot to name that. We'll make a little bit more room, and we'll expand this out. And we're just going to go ahead and build our rocks material now. Before we worry about anything else, we're just going to build one material at a time. We'll start with the rocks, we'll do the ground, and then we'll hook those up. And then we'll hook up our puddles with a placeholder for things that are going to end up changing later on. And that way we'll have the armature built, and then we can concentrate on the things that have the functions attached to them for our input parameters. Right, so rocks. I have, the basic layout here. I've got, nice color and, what will be nice color happening in here. I do want to make it more crackly though. So I'm going to go ahead and add some cracks to the rocks. I'm going to go to my library. I'm going to get cells 3. And we're going to use this as the basis for what we're going to be doing with the cracks. I had the scale set to 37. I'm just looking at my notes. Again, it really depends on what you want. And I brought the hardness down a little bit. I had it at 0.39. Next, we're going to get a blur. And we're going to use this, we're going to blur it ever so slightly. And what it's effectively doing is widening these out a little bit, because next we're going to put a levels node and we're going to tighten it back up, and the end result is going to be a thicker line. So our original looks like this, and now we have something that looks more like that. I also want to flatten it out a little bit too. Again, we're going back to using a warp, and I'm going to the library and I'm going to get, I forget the name of it, Crystal 1. And we're going to actually also use this as the basis for our snow. But for right now, I want it large, and we're going to use it for the crackle in our rocks, and then we're just going to use a transform 2D later on to use it for our snow. And this way we can use the same node here for both. And we're going to bring this way down till we end up with a crackle that we're happy with. That's pretty good. It just kind of breaks it up, so it looks like it's kind of got this sort of jaggedy, ragged thing going on. And it is very, very sharp now, so I'm going to get an HQ blur, and we'll soften those edges just a little bit. Okay. Now, just like we did here, we're going to have kind of a set of possible masks depending on what we're going to want them for. So this first one, I'm going to just take this and just maybe sharpen it ever so slightly, but it's basically the same thing. I'm going to get an invert node because I'm also going to want an inverse of this, and I'm going to get another levels node. And just like up here, this first one has the most grayscale information. So we're going to base our color map off of this one because it's not just black and white. It's got black, it's got gray, it's got white, and we're adjusting it for that. We need the color inverted because we also need it as a mask. And here as a mask, I don't want any of those grays. I want it completely black and white. And you can, this is going to determine the edges. So, I want it kind of thick because I want to capture all the details that I'll be getting off of this mask. And that'll allow us to lay colors over on top of each other without having to use, just using a copy, because we have this nice clean mask that we can do that with. So these are our cracks. We might as well throw a frame around those. And with those, we can now start to build our color. Now, like I just mentioned, we're going to need that mask because we're actually going to have two gradient maps. One of the gradient maps we're going to take from this right here. And this is going to be sort of the underlying color of our rocks. So I'm going to come into my gradient editor, and we can adjust that. So, you know, again, whatever color rocks you want. I'm going to go for kind of a steely gray and have the top also be, you know, in the blue family, but we'll just go lighter for the top. Maybe like that. And we're going to use this one for this gradient editor. And here I want we're going to be multiplying these on top of each other. So it's going to essentially be black and white. But again, I don't want like this reddish black. I'm going to go for more bluish black. And we'll let it take up quite a bit of space in here. So maybe not all of them, but you know, you're picking up a lot of the grays. I want it to be quite dark. That ought to be okay. And then we're going to get a blend node, and we're going to multiply them. And we now have, that's probably a bit too blue. I'm double clicking on that. It's going to make it darker and maybe grayer. So we've got this rock. I think that top is too white. We're going to make this darker too. Yeah, that's probably okay. But you can make your rocks whatever color you want. And why don't we go ahead and start plugging this into our output nodes. I'm going to right-click here, View Outputs in 3D View. Oh, you know why? Because I have this ambient occlusion in here, and it's currently set to black, and so that it's washing everything out. We're just going to pop a white in here for now, and that ought to take care of our problem. There we go. So that's the color. Next we have, well, we're going to leave, the rock isn't going to have any scattering, so we're going to leave that one alone for now. Let's do the normal next. Now we've got a very nice normal in here from our bevel, but what I'm also going to do is blend it with something that's going to give it a bit more of a surface texture. And we can go ahead and use this guy right here. I'm going to get a transform node, because I don't want it to be exactly the same. So why don't we make it finer, and we can also make it more even. And then we can get a height to normal, and we can blend the two of them together. So let's get this normal from our bevel node, which looks like that. And then we can take this guy and we can overlay the two of them and see how we like it. Let's just plug that in, and then we can adjust the surface according to what we need. So first of all, I think I want this smaller. I want this even finer. So we'll go ahead and make it small. And let's just make it less overall. And finally, we're blending it here with an overlay, but we can also lower the opacity somewhat. So that's okay. You know what? I'm going to make it less fun. I'm going to bring it back up in size again, because it's giving me more variety. The smaller I make it, sort of the more even it becomes, and I don't think I want it quite that even. And remember, I'm only looking at these areas where the actual rocks are. Right? I think so far so good. What we don't have yet is a normal for this. And we're going to get another height to normal, and we're going to get another blend. But this time, I mean, you don't have to do it this way. In my notes, I ended up, that's what I got this mask for, because when I laid them, well, let's try it first without, let's try it as an overlay first. And I'm looking where it's matching here with my color. And it looks kind of washed out. So I ended up doing it with a copy and then masking it out. And that gave me sort of a much more solid line between them. But again, that's how you want to do it. Let's move this back. The other thing I want to, let's take care of our height straight away, because we have, our height map is only going to be these, the ground and the rock masks. We're not, everything else we're going to handle with normals as far as things looking bumpy. And I think it'll make life easier if we have our heights in here. First, let's make sure that our heights are set up in our renderer. So I go Material, Default, Edit, and I can set up a bunch of different things here, and I want my height scale set to some number that is not 0. Next, we're going to get a blend node, and we're just going to make our height mask. So this is our puddles. That has nothing to do with our height. This is the mask that we're going to be using. I'm going to use the height from this. So that is our foreground because that is our white area here. And for right now, well, we might as well just put in some stuff for the ground. We can take this and we're going to get a blur because I don't want sharpness here. I want this nice and blurred. I just want a kind of an undulation, and I also want it dark because we have this as our white. So we're going to get a levels node, and we're going to take this whole thing and we're going to tone it way down. And we can combine these two guys. Oh, I don't like that mask at all. Let's see what we can do about this. See, what this is saying is that this is going down under this stuff. Yeah, and be careful about this. This is, it has to do with this bevel node. I couldn't figure out a way of getting around it. It's part of a warp of some sort. So I just make sure that my white areas pretty much mask it up. I think I'm going to cheat. I've gone off my notes. This is coming out quite differently, so I'm just going to wing it here. I'm going to bring this whole thing up ever so slightly relative to what's going on with the ground, and we'll do the exact opposite here. There, that's better, because now any of our rock areas are always higher than what's going on with the ground. So that's better. And we'll stick that in there. So we're starting to get some heights, but it's very confusing because it's all over the place. And we've got the mask all set up, so let's just go ahead and run the rocks through their proper masks. I don't know if that'll work. It's not a normal color, but let's see if it works as a blank. Yeah, it seems to. It just makes it easier to look at this way. Yeah, so we now can see the difference between the areas that are going to be our rocks and the areas that are going to have the ground and the puddles. So I'm pretty happy with that mix. We've got, this is what I wanted. I wanted these kind of tendrils coming out, and we've taken that basic rock shape and we've chopped it up. Okay. Then we have, for the rocks, the next thing down the line, we have our roughness. And for this, I'm gonna go back into my library and get a normal to height. We're gonna get the HQ. You know what? We're probably good with, we don't need the high quality one. I think we're just fine with the regular one. I'm assuming it's less computing power. And we're going to take our height map here, and we're going to convert, and we're going to take our normal map here rather, and we're going to convert it into a height map. I'm kind of debating whether we should, you know what? Let's see what happens if we use this one instead. Yeah, I think I like it better. Let's do that. And we're going to get rid of these two. And this way we're using a height map that's based entirely on the normal map, rather than worrying about, because honestly, this is, it's giving us basic information, but because we're dealing with such fine lines in our original, it's not giving us the best bevel in the world. So while it's okay for big things like this to get us started, I think for the final height map, I think I want to go with this more detailed one. So we changed our minds. But we also can use it for our roughness map, which is how I was originally doing it. I'm going to get an invert grayscale because I want my deepest areas to be the roughest in this case. And then we can get a levels node and adjust that for our roughness. So we're talking about rocks here. Well, why don't we plug it in and watch it go? We might as well get the, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to duplicate this guy so I don't have to keep going off and grabbing that mask. And in this case, we've got our rock's roughness, and we have got, well, nothing for the other one right now, so I'm just going to get a color in here. And that's going to be our ground. And then we can plug that in. And this way, we've got it all set up. So now we're only paying attention to those rocks. And they're a bit shiny, but we can now come into this levels node, and because we have it set up, we can actually see it in the renderer while we adjust it, which I think better. So I think I want it more even. It's kind of a tough little map to do, but those black areas, well, you know, we got water here, so if we've got some shiny rocks, I'm not going to get overly worried about it. But I do think I want them a little bit glossier overall. Right now I'm going for variety in there, trying to get as much as I can. You know what this doesn't have in here, which I think will make better roughness map? Well, first of all, let's look at this at 2K. That might make a big difference. That makes a huge difference. Yeah, I like that. But I want those cracks deeper. Yeah, I mean, when you have that big of a difference, it really makes, you do have to change your levels, especially, because things were just that much fuzzier. But it's okay. I mean, that's the nice thing about Substance is that, it's non-destructive, so, you just go through and you change the bits that need changing. Yeah, I think that's good now. Seem to have a missing part here. Maybe we'll find a use for that later. Oh yeah, we're gonna use it for the snow. I forgot what that was for. I'm pretty good. I'm not entirely thrilled with the color, but well, might as well take care of that now. I think let's start by adjusting this levels node, because we might be able to fix it with just this. I'm not liking that super harsh. I want a softer gradient in here, the rocks, and then I think we'll make the rest of it in the gradient node. We'll make this a little less dark. Maybe this a little bit more dark. I don't want there to be such a big color difference between the two. Yeah, that's good. All right. So we've got our resolution set now, which I honestly should have done much earlier. Let's get back to where we were. And this is my roughness. And we'll just actually now just take the whole thing up this way. Okay. And we can also come back in here, and I'd like to see a bit more variety in the roughness of the surface. So I'm going to go back to that normal map, and I'm going to do the same thing to that as we did here, where which one? This one. The normal to height. I'm going to duplicate that, and this time I'll do it off of this guy. Actually, you know what? That's kind of a waste. I'm just going to take this transform 2D that I used to start that whole chain, and we'll go ahead and invert that. As you can tell, I'm no longer paying attention to my notes. And we'll get a levels node for that, and we will blend the two of these guys together using a multiply, I think. I think I'm going to just do the one levels node at the end. Get rid of this one. So we've blended these two together. So we have the sort of the inverted version of the height that we're getting from this rock. Yeah, I think flat is okay on top here. I'm looking at this white. It gives these tops. I like these tops flat. I'm gonna leave it like that because it changed from the lower res. We've got these two multiplied, and now we can adjust them by themselves. Just make sure we're plugged in right. We can adjust them all as a group. Yeah, I like that better because it's got there's just more going on that way. Okay. Oh, and we still have roughness. Yeah, it's important to stay on top of the hole, keeping it organized when it's this gigantic, because it will run away with you pretty fast if you give it a chance. Oh, wait a minute. This is our height, sorry. Okay. We have metallic. Yeah, I'm going to put some metallic in this rock. And the metallic will only be in the rock, so just like the height map, this is one that we're not going to add to later on. Well, we're going to block out. I might as well just do the whole thing now. Okay. We're going to use, let's use this roughness mask. I think this is probably good. Or this one. Let's use this one. So we're going to have the most metal up in these white areas, and I don't want a lot of it around. So we will put that here. We're going to use this mask, and we're going to get a levels node in here where we're going to wipe out pretty much all of it. So those flat areas on top are going to have a bit of a metal sheen to them, and we can do something like that. That's probably got everything already cut out, but I don't know for sure. So I'm just going to go ahead and make sure that I've got the ground is cut out because I just cut it out with this mask here. So anything black here is not going to show up if it's got any stuff in here. The puddles we still have to mask out. So I'm going to, again, we're using grayscale, so this is my foreground, which corresponds to the mask that I put in. And what I'm doing here, in essence, is putting a black foreground on top of what came out of here. So, yeah, it doesn't look like it's changed at all, but that's how you do it. So if there is any overlap, that's going to get rid of it. And that's done. We're not going to touch this one anymore either. And finally, what do we have down here? We have our specular level. I think for this right now, we're going to put in an inverse of the roughness, and we can adjust it with a levels node. We're going to keep it simple. So again, I'm looking at the rocks here, and we can just pretty much globally bring it down to nothing or close to it. And we do want some, places where it's shiny, it should have some specularity, and we got that metallic coming through. Yeah, that's pretty good. All right, so we've got these kind of semi-hooked up. Let's start bringing these out in the middle. So this is our final normal for the rocks. We are done with the height. I mean, we could also bring this out here with the metallic since we're done with that. I do not have the color hooked. So pretty much the only thing I have hooked up right now with that second blend is my roughness. Okay, so these two nodes I'm going to bring out here because these are where we're going to start blending up the various three groups. So we'll start with what's going down on the ground here. So now we're basically going to do the same thing for the ground section as we did up here for the rock section, and we took care of the normals and the roughness, but we're just going to take care of the rest of the business here. So these are our two placeholders. I'm going to bring them down here because those are already connected, and then we just have to make the rest of the maps. Okay, and now we're basically going to do the same thing for the ground. We're going to build it like it's its own separate material. We've already got a couple of placeholders going on here, and then we're going to just join the two together. This obviously is a much simpler material, and we're going to kind of do the color and the normal together because what I'm trying to do is get some variety going in the way that the greens interact with each other and the way that they do bumps and everything. So it's pretty straightforward. We're going to get a height to normal, and we're going to take this grayscale that we made, and we're going to use that. And then we're going to get a normal to height. I think the regular will do. There's an HQ and a regular. Let's see what the difference is. I'm going to go with the high quality one. So we've converted this to a grayscale, essentially. And it looks very different from this. So I'm going to get a gradient map, and I'm going to make a nice color off of this. This is going to be my overlay. Let's do the bottom one first, because it makes more sense this way. The bottom one we're doing straight off of here. And this is going to be our background, and we can set this one up. So, some nice greens or whatever color you want. It doesn't have to be green. But whatever color you want your ground, you can start making this is going to be sort of the underlying part, and then we're going to have a highlight part here. So I'm thinking underlying part. A little bit more yellow. And we can mix it up a little bit. And the closer you have these points to each other, the sharper the lines between them become. So if you want a nice smooth gradient, you put them far apart. If you want some nice line effects going, you get them really close together. So that'll do for a background for now. I'm not going to spend hours and hours on this gradient because I usually do. And for this, we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to overlay something that's more yellowy. And let's fool around with some blending filters. Let's see what happens when we do multiply. I kind of like that. Anyway, you can mess around with that. It's a nice way of getting some different things going on with your colors, but it also gives you an opportunity to do what we're going to do next. Actually, no, I want more in here. I want more going on. So we'll spice it up a little bit. Let's see what the end result is. Yeah, that's better. And the reason I kind of wanted to see, to have it more differentiated is because that's kind of going to illustrate what I want to do next, which is once we've got this blended, and this is going to be our color, by the way, so we might as well plug that into our color. I'm going to just duplicate this because it's going to duplicate my mask. And this is our color here, so we're going to put our rock color on top, and we're going to take our ground color and we're going to put it underneath because that is our background, and then we can plug that in to our color. I would like my normals to be able to pick up not just what's going on with my original ground mask here, but also what we're doing on top here. And I've now got this blended mask that I'm using for my color, and I can go ahead and turn this into a completely different yet related normal map. So I've turned it into a grayscale, and I'm going to run it through a levels node, to sort of tighten, to get a little bit more information happening in here, like this. And I can get another height to normal. And I now have a normal map that's, actually very different from this original normal map that I had. And this one is related to what's going on with the color, while this one is related to what's going on, in the underlying background. So, it's not really corresponding to the color, but it's corresponding to the overall height of the ground, for example, because it's the same mask that's getting used here, although it's, very dark. So it makes for a much nicer normal map if instead of using this one, which, in effect, it's being reinterpreted. So we are, to a certain extent, using this as our starting point, but we've ended up someplace quite different, and I think nicer. But what I do want to do is also have a normal that deals with this edge here, because the way we have it set up now, if we go to the masks, it's not going to, it'll cut them out, but it will leave it, I mean, it's less textural. So I'm going to get another height to normal, and I'm going to just make, instead of doing this map like this, I'm going to use it cut out. And what it does is it gives me some information in here that's lacking. That edge information won't come up unless I do it this way. So that's why I'm not using it originally like this, but I'm using it with this mask. Because to be honest, I like this one kind of better because it's got more to do with the color. And we can now overlay them. Now I think I'm going to do it the other way around. And I'm using an overlay, but this time this one's on top, this one's below. And what I can do now is I can lower the opacity. So, you know, they're blending, but I want this one to be less important than this one. And this now gives me the normal for my ground. So we can now plug that in instead of our placeholder here. Yeah, you see, because this way the normal follows the actual color, which I think makes more sense. Yeah, okay. I'm happy with that. All right. Next we have the roughness, because the height isn't, we're done with the height. So the roughness is next. We've got the placeholder already in there. And for that, I think we're just going to go with this normal to height, and we'll fool around with that in levels. You know what? Let's see what this looks like if we put a mask on it. You may or may not like it better. 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. I'm going to leave it alone. Let's invert this grayscale first, and then we can fool around with its levels to get our roughness. Okay, I'm going to replace that placeholder so we can take a look at it in here. Yeah, that'll do for now. Now you can fix yours how you want, but I'm pretty happy with that as far as the ground goes for the roughness. So we'll make some frames here. And next we're going to do, there we go. And then next we're going to do our specular level, which is basically, you know, the inverse of our roughness is how I'm going to do it. Get another levels, and we can do it off of the non-inverted one. Let's get another blend node. We'll pick up that mask. The rocks go on top, and then this will go in the background, and we can replace specular level. Where are we? In here. And then we can go back to our levels node, and this way we can see what we're doing in the renderer. And then we'll just globally bring it way down, because neither rocks nor grass is particularly specular. I think what we're missing here, we're missing our ambient occlusion, and we're missing a scatter mask. Well, we didn't have one for the rock, but we do want one for the ground. But I think I'm going to wait on the scatter mask as far as the ground is concerned until we start doing our water and our snow, because that's really all, you know, that's where all our scatter masks are going to be. We might as well do them all at the same time. So we'll leave that for now, but right now we've got everything but the AO done. So let's get rid of this placeholder. Again, we can just duplicate this because that's the setup. We can line them up in order. And we never made a spec map for, I mean, we never made an AO for this one, so let's go ahead and do that. We'll go to the library. We'll get an ambient occlusion. And, well, no, I'm not, wait, where is our, let's see what happens if we do, I'm trying not to make a new mask. I think let's make a height map from that normal. Yeah, none of this goes with my notes because I kind of got off script on some of this stuff. So this is the height map that we've made from our final normals, and let's see what happens if we make our AO off of that. The reason it's doing that is because we've mismatched these. I can either, if I get rid of this, it should be okay. Well, the minute we put another black and white node in here, it'll be fine. But we need to make an ambient occlusion now for our grass. And you know what? Let's stick to the same principle. We're gonna make one off of this. So I'm making that super shallow because that's an awful lot of processing for something that I don't really need very much. You know what? Let's, instead of using an ambient occlusion here, we're going to kind of hack it a little bit. Since I only really want just the very barest of information anyway, we're going to kind of get more or less the same idea doing this. I mean, it's not for real, but you know what? It's close enough. And there's a big difference in how much calculation each one of these takes. And now it works again. See, it was mixing its metaphors there. Yeah, I mean, because, you know, we were going really super light in here anyway, and, like, you can hardly see it, and I'm not going to take almost an entire millisecond to do that. Yeah. All right. So far, so good. So that's sort of the basic material without any puddles. And so now we're going to just add basic puddles with a bunch of placeholders. I want to get the setup done so it's organized and it makes sense because it's a beast of material. So we'll do I think that makes more sense like this. There. So we're going to do now another row. So these are all these blend nodes are identical. And we're going to do a second one now for adding puddles. So while we do that, I'm going to just make some placeholder colors here. We'll pick our actual puddle color here, which we will use. So like that. That'll be our color. We can grab a normal. We're not going to have, well, the AO is, we're going to use this mask. We're going to use a lighten for that, so that's taken care of. We'll grab a nice neutral gray for most of everything else. Okay. So let's set up our blends here. And then we can watch what happens, like, on the render as opposed to having to imagine it, which is why I'm doing it like this. So for all of these, it's going to be exactly the same thing. We're going to get our background from the previous node. We're going to use the puddle mask as our mask. And, well, let's do the ambient occlusion first. It's going to be different. We're not going to use it as a mask. We're going to just lay it on top, and we're going to use a lighten blend. And what that's done is it's just put the white, it just slapped it on top of anything that was underneath it because it, you know, it doesn't get any lighter than white. So we can kind of do that here. What am I missing here? Oh, my scatter. Yeah, okay. All right. We can get another blend node, and now we'll hook up that mask to it. And because the white areas are where we have our water, that goes in our foreground. and then the previous node goes in the background. And we now have the color of where the water is going to be. And I'm pretty happy with that layout. I think that looks good. So we'll keep going with that. I think the masks are fine. Next we have the normals. So I'm just going to duplicate this node. I'm going to bring this normal in as a background. And then we have a placeholder up here. And we're going to put that in the foreground. And now we have the areas where our puddles are no longer have normal information, although I think they still have some height information. So we will be doing the same thing for the height, because we did it for the metallic, but we didn't do it for the height. So we'll make that a little bit bigger. We can copy this blend node right here, and we're going to do exactly the same thing, only now we're going to need this black for other things. Some of them might be in color. I think we also need it as a color, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the same black. We're going to put a grayscale on it. So this way we can use the same nodes for all our black needs, whether it's color or grayscale. So what it's done here is it's put these pure black areas on top of any place where there are puddles. So these will be the absolute lowest spots and won't have any of the ground undulation underneath them. And that should make them look even flatter now. Yeah, I think that's better. Okay, next down the line is our roughness. So again, we're going to use this same setup, and we're going to want black as the thing in the foreground because we're using that mask. And then we're going to take this roughness in here, and we now have shiny puddles. They don't have any metallic. I think we already did them. Yeah, we already did them as far as blocking out the metallic, so that's all squared away. And the last thing we have left is our specular level. So since they're going to be pretty specular, why don't we, well, you know what we can do? We can just copy this first one and plug this in, but we don't want them 100% specular, so I'm going to highlight this noodle, click on a levels node, and that's just going to place a levels node in there for me. And we have a lightness blend here, so even if I bring this down, it's still going to be lighter than anything else in there, but it'll give me a way of controlling my specularity. So there. And that's the setup done as far as connecting all three sections to the outputs. And so now all we have left to do is to deal with the stuff that, that is connected to the snow variable. And before we go on to the next section, why don't we go ahead and make our variable, because a lot of stuff is going to be dependent on that now. So I'm going to my input parameters, I'm hitting the plus sign, and we're going to call this snow. And I'm going to set the default to 0, because we'll start with no snow. And it's just going to be a float one that's just going to run from 0 to 1. And we're going to use it, in a few different ways, depending on where we are, to run, a bunch of different functions that are going to get this snow overlay, and at the same time turn this water from, clear water, which it's not right now, to ice. So it's going to kind of get a little bit more opaque, and it's going to start to develop a normal map. And we're going to do that in part 2.